Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers get another win with an impressive performance on the road. The Cleveland Cavaliers keep rolling. Are Donovan Mitchell and Kawhi Leonard serious MVP candidates? Plus, the Lakers and Warriors might be turning a corner, albeit pretty slowly, and we'll get you up to date on the latest and all the NBA trade talks of the week of the deadline. This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us, joining us, being an everydayer, joining us Monday through Friday. You can catch us on all podcast platforms as well as on youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, co-host of Locked On Nuggets, joined by David Ramil of Locked On Heat, where I was fortunate enough to join him on the Monday episode. I was with Wes Goldberg, who's also on Locked On NBA on Fridays. So if you want to hear more on the Miami Heat and their trade stuff going on, you can catch that. On tonight's show, we'll run down all the action from Monday night in the association. We'll get to Kawhi Leonard and Donovan Mitchell continuing their strong play as the Cavaliers and Clippers keep surging. We'll talk about the Lakers and the Warriors and whether or not they've turned a corner. And we will talk a little bit about trade rumors later on, including, is Jaylen Green going to be a Rocket long-term? All this and more on today's show. David, we got a lot of places we can start tonight with a pretty good slate here in the association as far as the games go. Why don't we start with the Los Angeles Clippers, who got a win 149-144 over the Hawks. This was a really great game. Actually, the Hawks gave them a real fight. This was the last game of the Clippers East Coast road trip. Their next game is at home. They coming off of facing Miami and getting a win on Sunday. They travel to Atlanta, and this is the kind of game that the Clippers of old would have punted. They've been like, oh, nope, it's a back-to-back on an East Coast road trip. No way. But instead, guess what they got tonight? They got a really strong performance from all of their guys. Paul George, back from injury, 32 minutes, 27 seconds, 18 points for PG. Kawhi was massive in this one. 36 points on 13 of 20 shooting. In the fourth quarter in particular, he was phenomenal in this game. He hit a monster three to put them up 5. That was an absolutely huge shot. In the fourth quarter, Kawhi Leonard, 13 points on 4 of 5 shooting, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. James Harden in this game added 11 in the fourth quarter as they were able to take it home. Came back from behind. Trae Young in the loss, 25 points. They got 27 from DeAndre Hunter, back from injury, off the bench. I thought Bojan Bogdanovic played really well in this game as well. This is a fun game. Hawks were up for this one, but the Clippers were just too much. They got big contributions from Amir Coffey in this one. Like Amir Coffey was huge in this game in the fourth quarter with 13 points in this contest. So the Clippers win again.
Yeah.
Where are you at with the Clippers? How seriously do you take them? And there's starting to be a little bit of buzz for Kawhi Leonard MVP. What do you think?
I'm really high on them. It seems like an eon ago since they had that 6-game losing streak after they traded for James Harden. And of course, there was the whole panning of his system and how is he going to fit there. And I remember having this conversation here, and I thought, eventually they would straighten out. I didn't think that they would be this good. And I have to say that they have been surprisingly excellent, and yet they are legitimate. I see them, and I saw them live against the Heat just a couple nights ago, and they look dominant. And talking to Clippers folks, there's a sense there that they are a legitimate candidate as is. And I know that there's some talk about them perhaps engage in a potential trade over the next couple of days before the trade deadline. But as far as their core is concerned, what Kawhi, what PG, what Harden and Westbrook have brought to the table, and their ability to mesh so effectively at this point in the season, I'm starting to buy into it. It's just a kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop because this team has dealt with injury in the past. But you brought up a good point about that this team is very different than those past Clippers teams that they would have punted on a game like tonight. It's a back-to-back game, and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are playing in 2024. Yeah. That is remarkable, and not just playing, but dominating. And Kawhi looks incredible. He looks as good as he did as a Raptor. He looks as good as he has throughout any point in his career. He's great. He's healthy. He's durable. He's strong, putting up shots with ease from 3-point range. He just looks incredible out there, playing his usual defense, and his offense has been perhaps even the best of his career. And that's saying something, considering what a great player he was, and the past years of injury and everything else had kind of, taken some of the shine off his name. But he's been really, really good. As far as MVP candidacy, that seems like it's jumping the gun a little bit, but
right.
the criteria is so difficult to pinpoint on what an MVP is. Yeah. And yet, they trade for Harden. How much of that falls on him? How much of that is just Kawhi being healthy? Paul George deserves some candidacy too. Like, he's really, really good. Maybe not an MVP candidate, but he's been so good. His 3-point shot is so deadly. I don't know, man. Like, I'm starting to believe it. I wouldn't be surprised if he is a top 5, maybe even as high as a top 3 candidate, especially with Joel Embiid expected to miss a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I think he'll probably make ballot, is what I'd say. Like, there's a good chance, I think, for Kawhi to make ballot, but I don't think he'll wind up in serious contention for it. If you just look at it's one of those things that sounds really good because Kawhi's numbers are good, but then you do what I do, which is you match them up against like Joker and SGA and Giannis, and you're like, okay, like, really good, maybe not there, and that's okay because they've got Kawhi Leonard to try and win playoff series, and we'll see if the Clippers can get it done. Another guy that probably deserves a little bit more attention than he's getting is Donovan Mitchell, who has been absolutely phenomenal. So I looked at this today. Since the December 16th game, they faced Boston on like the 14th and lost a 2-game set to them. Since then, Mitchell's averaging 29 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. He's been incredible. He has been sensational. And he did it again tonight versus the Kings at home, as Mitchell goes for 29 points with a plus 28, 11 of 20 from the field, 5 of 11 from 3-point range, 5 assists for Mitchell tonight. They get 22 from Max Strus, old friend of the Heat. Max Strus. Jared Allen chips in his usual 19 points, only 7 boards for Allen because, well, the Domantas Sabonis exists. It's hard to get rebounds. The Cavs defense was tremendous in this game. The numbers aren't going to show it because the Kings shot 46% from the field and 39% from 3. But the way that they were able to snuff out so many actions of what the Kings wanted to get to, and like De'Aaron Fox goes 8 of 20 from the field tonight, 19 points on 20 shots. That to me is like a big indicator of how good their defense is. This is the number 2 defense in the NBA. They've been absolutely terrific this season. I think Jared Allen deserves more DPOY candidacy. I think he deserves more consideration for that award, even if, as I agree with y'all that Bam Adebayo, I still think is the best pound for pound defender in the NBA. Maybe not this season. He's had to take on more offense, but Jared Allen's been phenomenal either way. Darius Garland did play in this one, 11 points. They're starting to figure that out, I think, a little bit more. This Cavs team is red hot. I can't buy into them because of what I saw from the playoffs last year, but I do think that what Mitchell has done, keeping the Cavs not only afloat, but thriving when they were without both Mobley and Garland, deserves a lot more attention. And JB Bickerstaff has done a really good job of getting through the regular season.
Yeah, I agree. I think Bickerstaff, coach of the year, seems a little unlikely given their expectations at the start of the year, and they haven't really eclipsed those. But I mean, just to be able to weather the storm too, because they didn't look this good. They were struggling, and they were a middling team as they were trying to incorporate these new players and trying to get that balance between Garland and Mitchell just right. But the fact that he hasn't playing at such a high level, that Mitchell's been contributing, that Jared Allen hasn't sulked or just kind of tapered off in any way, and I think he's been a better defender than Bam has this year, so I will definitely cop to that. They're a really good team. I don't know. What is the biggest difference, do you think, between this year's team and what we saw from them in the playoffs, and how can they continue to improve or avoid being exposed the way they were against the Knicks last year?
3-point volume's up, so they shot 56% from 3 tonight. They're bombing from 3. They figured out a lot of stuff. I think, honestly, a lot of it, and this is where it gets kind of awkward, like they're in a pretty tough spot because they make a lot of sense when it's Donovan Mitchell with Jared Allen, pick and roll, and then you've got shooters in all these positions. You can make it work with, I think, even with Evan Mobley and the 2 big. I think the 2 big is less awkward than it is Garland and Mitchell trying to figure out how to play together. You need kind of Mitchell and spaced shooters. You need that's like the best way to make use of Mitchell, even if that isocentric stuff can get you in trouble. Like, I think they can make it work with Garland because I think Garland's phenomenal. But like, you probably would look to augment the rest of the roster by trading Garland if it weren't for Mitchell's free agency the year after this one. So in 2025, they have to reckon with that. So they have to keep Garland, but they have a real capacity to do a lot with Mitchell. We'll see where they wind up going. Maybe it was just a bad sequence last year. Maybe just they didn't have the guys. But I think George Niang, Strus,
Sam
Merrill, Dean Wade, like they're getting huge contributions from everybody, and hopefully they can put together a better playoff run this season. Up next, we'll talk about the rest of the games from the association, including the Los Angeles Lakers and Golden State Warriors might be getting ready for another one of those late season runs, or they're just beating up on bad teams. We'll discuss that next on Locked On NBA. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. Like the over on Harrison Butker field goal attempts. I think that the Chiefs will move the ball, but will probably stall out in the red zone a little bit. Also, the lines move back towards the Niners. Sharps are talking themselves into fading Patrick Mahomes again, which, can't blame him. It's worked out so well for him so far. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Now, not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. There's also going to have cross sport parlays, so you'll be able to do things like Niners money line and NBA props. Like, lots of cool stuff you'll be able to find on FanDuel. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. Matt Moore alongside David Ramil. All right, let's keep going here, David, getting through the games from Monday night in the association. I didn't catch this one. You watched the insanity of this game. Lakers were up huge on Charlotte, and then all of a sudden I look up, and it's like a 4-point game. What happened in this game?
Well, Brandon Miller happened. He's been phenomenal of late, and he had 33 points tonight, 13 to 25 from the floor, 5 of 11. A lot of that coming in the fourth quarter. They were just going to him. He was their go-to player, and he was just making it happen for Charlotte. And he wound up putting the Lakers on their heels, if not for a couple big buckets out of stretch from LeBron, some free throws, etc. AD with a nice dunk. Also, they managed to be able to pull away, and the Hornets still have glaring talent issues. No LaMelo Ball tonight. They were starting Ish Smith in his place. Good old Ish Smith. But Miller looks phenomenal. He looks really good. And the Lakers, they're kind of still the Lakers. I have a hard time taking them seriously at this point in time, even though they have won 3 straight. But, they had a good overall game from AD. He had 26 points, 25 from LeBron. So just enough to be able to beat up on a bad Charlotte team.
How about 28 points from D'Angelo trade bait Russell, who was also a -2?
Does anybody play better around the trade deadline than D'Angelo Russell? I think
I love it because he's got that super, just like making him rethink trading me energy. Just, you don't want to trade me. Look how good I am. Come on, guys. You would miss this versus Charlotte. The Hornets are so beat up. But yeah, it is notable that Brandon Miller really is kind of taking a step forward. That's significant in this game. 41 for Miles Bridges. They got 15 points from PJ Washington. Got 2 guys that are very popular in the trade market. So Lakers have now started to actually get a few wins on the road. Although I will say they continue to be a team that beats up on the bad teams and can't really beat anybody with a pulse. Although, I can't really criticize them that much for this, David, because the Mavericks are like that. They've just played more of them. The Lakers this season are 13-17 versus teams that are 500 or better, and they are 14-8 versus teams under 500. Mavericks are 16-5 versus teams under 500. So that's kind of the formula. The team that I think is actually starting to turn this around in that regard is the Golden State Warriors, who are at 14-3 versus teams under 500. They had the toughest schedule in the league up to this point. They've had the strongest strength of, and that's been since month 1. Like they have their schedule was so front heavy through honestly the first 45 games of the season. And what do you know? Because it's an 82 game season and all things kind of settle in eventually. Now all of a sudden the Warriors are starting to pick up steam as they get a win tonight in Brooklyn, 109-98. Jonathan Kuminga starting 28 points, 10 boards. He's been a monster lately. Totally erasing any of the conversation about whether he should play or start or they should trade him. Looking like the kind of contributor that they need. Draymond's a plus 11. Kerr said after the game that he feels like they're turning a corner. That with Draymond back and like this is significant. They're winning the Draymond minutes that they were losing to start the season. And that's a very big deal. They're no longer losing these types of minutes. That's a massive, massive deal. Now, look, Steph Curry was only a +6 versus Draymond +5. That's still concerning. You want to dominate in the minutes when Steph's on the floor. Steph with 29 tonight, 4 threes, 12 of 24 from the field. But look, if it just means them beating up the bad teams the rest of the way, that gets them in position where maybe they can slide into the 7, the 8, the 7, the 6. And your odds of making the playoffs then are very good. And then you have Steph Curry, and I guess like anything can happen. I think the point here is that while I think there are fundamental problems with the Warriors that they still have to kind of address, and they could fall off a cliff anytime they face a tough opponent, there is a chance that the schedule alone will give them a chance to kind of dig themselves out and save at least a little face this season as they try and reconfigure things long term.
You don't see them as a play-in team at the least?
I do. I think that they could make a play-in tournament. I'm saying, like, I don't think that they are a lock for it.
Okay.
Like, I can't get to where I'm like, oh, because, I mean, they're out right now. Like, they're in 12th place in the Western Conference. Now, they're only a game out in the loss column from 10th, right?
Right.
But they're 4 games back in the loss column from 7th and 4 games back from 6th outright. And you go, well, that's not a lot. It's a little. Like, you have to understand, after All-Star, you only got 30 games left. It's much harder to make up that round, especially with teams that are over 500 than you think. And so I think that there's a chance for them, but I do think that they're going to have to, like, they better have this stuff that they've done versus these bad teams better carry over versus the good teams, because they have to go on a significant run, I think, to keep pace and put themselves, because also, honestly, look, we had 2 play-in tournament teams make the conference finals last year, but neither one was a 9-10, right? Like, we still haven't seen a 9-10 make a run. You got to get into those top 2 spots still in order to not be facing history going against you, I think.
You're kind of moving the goalpost a little bit there now. Before it was attacking Miami for being a play-in tournament team and made it all the way to the finals. Now it's, what they did was okay, but, they weren't a 9-10 seed. I don't know. I view the Warriors as a team that, they've seen so much and accomplished so much over the course of their dynastic run. And this could seem like the last little bit of motivation that they need, for an older team, a team that's accomplished so much that doesn't really care as much about the regular season as they once did. You kind of need these perceived slights or challenges just to muster the energy to get through the slog of the 82 game season. And this might be the factor. Just again, getting Draymond back, getting this incredible spark from Kuminga, 12 free throws today. That's really incredible numbers here. That's Jimmy Butler, James Harden-esque type numbers, Joel Embiid type numbers, for him to be able to get to the line. Maybe that's more of an aberration than anything else, but I think he provides a spark. And if it all winds up tying together and you still got Steph Curry on your roster, you're good. I'm not too concerned about the Warriors. I think they'll be able to find a way to get into the play-in tournament. Again, I'm not sure exactly where they'll wind up, but even if they were to just wind up as a 9-10 seed, I wouldn't count them out completely.
We will see if they can keep the good vibes going with Golden State. And I will say, honestly, I think this is a little bit bad timing, because I'm like, you're going to be less likely to make a trade. And I just don't know that this roster is good enough. So we'll see what they do here between now and Thursday. Up next, well, we've gone through most of the games. We'll finish up talking about the rest of the games in the association, and we'll break down a few trade rumors, including, is it possible that Houston could actually move on from number two overall pick Jaylen Green? We'll talk about that next on Locked On NBA. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy is so important for all sorts of things in life. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And that's, I've been thinking a lot about the pressures that we feel to match up to expectations. That's been in my head a lot. And I think it's important to kind of balance those things positively with negatively. You can constantly feel like you're letting others down, but you should see it as an opportunity, because I was talking to my kid the other day and I was talking about how we can try and be the types of people, like we aspire to be the people that people will look up to us as. We want to be people that others will admire. And a good way to do that is just like manage your own stuff, right? So you're not taking it out on others. And that's a pretty common thing. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. The NBA trade deadline is fast approaching, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball is your place for live reaction. Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube today so you don't miss Josh Lloyd breaking down every NBA trade with analysis and insight you can only get from Locked On Fantasy Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So speaking of the trade deadline, we got some stuff to kind of go over here. But first, I want to wrap up with the last few games that we got from the slate on Monday. Let's talk the Sixers. No Joel Embiid, and they lose by 16 to the Mavericks. Kyrie Irving's back, so that's good for them. He 23-5 for the Mavericks, who just really need to get healthy, and I think that they can compete. But it's looking pretty bleak. It's crazy because the Sixers were so well balanced when Embiid was playing, in terms of they won the non-Embiid minutes by a big margin, and then dominated in his minutes too. And without him, the whole structure is kind of cracking and falling apart. Embiid's going to be out at least 2 months, is what Shams Charania reported on Monday. It could be way longer. It could be the season. So tough stuff there. But at least, for Dallas, this is a win that they needed to get. They needed to not drop this one. And they need to keep winning games like this if they're going to keep any sort of hope of making a playoff spot outright.
Yeah, I mean, Irving was huge tonight. Late third quarter, he kind of started putting up some points to help them pull away. Josh Green had been big before that. He finished with 20 points on 6 of 9 shooting, 4 of 7 from three-point range. And Tyrese Maxey, the all-star, held to just 6 of 16 from the floor. So obviously going to be facing a lot more pressure without that balance that you spoke of, without Embiid drawing those double and triple teams, et cetera. It's going to be a lot more difficult for Maxey to put up the kind of numbers he did in the first half of the season. So I'm curious to see how he plays out the rest of the last couple of months or whatever, however long Joel Embiid might be out for the season.
Pelicans caught the Raptors on a back-to-back, and man, when the Pelicans look good, they look awesome. They absolutely rolled the Toronto Raptors 138-100 behind Brandon Ingram's 41 points on 16 of 21 from the field, including 8 of 11 from 3. Good gracious. 6 boards, 9 assists. His passing has been great this season. Only needed 16 from Zion in 21 minutes. They got 20 from CJ McCollum. Absolutely just jumped up and down on this team. Raptors are donezo. Like, that season is over. Time to start reconfiguring towards the future for them. But the Pelicans continue, when they lose pretty badly. But when they win, man, did the Pelicans look good.
Yeah, third straight for them. 5-5 over their last 10. So it's been up and down, as it has been for almost all the season, as they've been dealing with injuries and fit and everything else like that. But I think the conversation about how BI and Zion can fit, I think that's been somewhat quieted down. And I don't know. I still see this team as a very good and dangerous team. I don't know how it's going to play out over the course of the season, because they've had those lapses, because they've had those stretches where they just look kind of mediocre at best. But you're right, to your point. I mean, when they're great, they are really, really good. And can they capture that lightning in a bottle long enough to be able to not just get out of the play-in tournament, but just to be able to advance past the first round of the playoffs?
Let's talk about some trade stuff before we head on out of here. So I think it's gonna be a pretty quiet trade deadline. There's an agreement with that with most everybody, that this is not looking like it's gonna be a really There's not going to be a lot of fireworks now. Like sometimes things come out of nowhere late. Sometimes executives have plans and they'll just like hit the market with a blitz in the next 48 hours and stuff can happen, but it's looking pretty quiet when we're talking about like Kyle Kuzma and Tyus Jones and maybe DeJounte Murray. Then yeah, like it's a pretty quiet deadline overall. But there are some interesting things I think to talk about, including this show has garnered a little bit of attention through the months and years as we have been pretty critical of Jaylen Green. Now this is not a victory lap because Jalen's young. And truthfully, David, I feel like he has genuinely tried this season to embrace the style of basketball that the Houston Rockets are attempting to play. I think he has tried to be less usage heavy. I think he has tried to be less G League Unite. I think he has tried to fit in a lot more and try and play winning basketball this season. He just hasn't been necessarily very good at it as a pretty young player. Mostly the Rockets offense is bad. And the one thing that he's supposed to bring is scoring, and he's shot very poorly. He's played really well over the last, 2-3 weeks. And it definitely has, I think Houston is less likely to move him than they were 2 weeks ago. Yahoo Sports reported today that the Rockets had included him in discussions with the Brooklyn Nets. I had heard that and couldn't necessarily nail it down enough to report it. And I'd also heard that they've had conversations with the Utah Jazz as well. That isn't to say that the Houston Rockets are shopping Jaylen Green. It's more that if you're having discussions on how to improve things and they ask, hey, what about Jaylen Green? They're willing to discuss him. I think it's tough, right? I think it's difficult because I think they understand how talented Jaylen Green is. But I also think that Ime Udoka is trying to set a very high standard and is trying to win now and is not like, I don't think Ime Udoka is there for like rebuilding. And I don't think he's there for like another 4 years. They're not doing the Thunder approach of like, we're going to be super, super extremely patient. Alperen Sengun has already proven he's a winning player. I think Jabari Smith, honestly, even though he has some really bad nights, I think overall Jabari has proven he's a winning player. He defends at a high level, even if he's not necessarily playing well that night. Jalen hasn't shown the same. And so I'm not surprised to find that Jaylen Green is in these conversations. That doesn't mean he's going to get traded. It doesn't mean that he can't wind up being a great player for the Rockets. But it is interesting given the pushback you and I received that we're hearing this news of Jaylen Green being involved in these talks.
Yeah, I take no pleasure in it either. My comments a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago, however long it was, that he might project to be
last summer, David. Last summer.
It feels like a lot longer than that, but it was I said that he might wind up being a sixth man of the year kind of player, like a super sub, because he provides that scoring, etc. And he does not at that point he had not provided much else, and he continues to have taken a step back. I think his playmaking had taken a step forward last year. This year, without the ball in his hands as much, being more of an off-ball player with Fred VanVleet and others on that roster now, he's not. He does not have the freedom to, explore as much as he did once. And I think he's having a hard time because he's a young player, because his first couple seasons in the league were so, chaotic, let's say. And so I think I understand Houston's perspective. They want to win, and they want to win now. To your point, they don't want to be patient. And I don't know if they can afford to wait for that. And this is not necessarily an indictment on Jaylen Green, but I think that's just how a lot of Rockets fans and people around the league are taking it. Because if you can't contribute to winning now, that seems like, well, that means that you're a loser. That means that you're a bad player, etc. And I don't think of it that way. I think you can contribute. You don't fit what they're looking for right now. And it's not his fault that dynamic has changed so completely, from one year to next. He might have been given the freedom to do whatever he had wanted this year, but they changed coaches, they changed their style, they changed their approach, they added free agents. They were, a big splash in free agency, and that makes things difficult for the guy who had been handed the reins and the freedom to say, this is your team, shape it however you want to. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? We might have jumped the gun on that a little bit. Sorry. Now you can't really play the way that you have over the last couple of years. This is what we want from you. And it doesn't always work out that way because he's going to have off shooting nights, etc. So I kind of not feel sorry for him necessarily, but I don't think, empathetic is a good word. And so I don't know. I think he might benefit from a change of scenery just to continue to flourish elsewhere and be able to balance it. Now that he's had a taste for what a different style of basketball is, I think he can take those lessons and apply them elsewhere. I don't see them trading. I just don't know what the right package for a player like Jaylen Green would be. I guess if we're talking to Brooklyn, is this for Mikal Bridges we're looking to explore a trade for?
Yeah, and like that shows you the kind of bar, right? Where it's like they were trying to include Jaylen Green in a trade for a guy that, the Nets at least are telling people that they've received 5 first-round pick offers, which
sure,
that's a lot, and they've said no. That's
sure.
There's just a lot there to deal with. But I think that does kind of show you the quality of player because Mikal is very good. It's not like they're like, we'll move off Jaylen Green. It's like, okay, well, if we can add a marquee guy to really be a pillar next to Şengün and Van Vliet, and or Jabari Smith, then we'll do it. But I don't think they're going to move him for anything more than what is considered a major upgrade. That's what a lot of this comes down to is I found out in the last 2 weeks how annoyed executives get when it's described as shopping, when they're like, we offered to include a guy for an upgrade. Is that shopping a guy? And I'm like, well, you're willing to trade him. And then they're like, that's not the same as shopping. Shopping is like, I want to move this guy off my roster. So that's definitely a difference, which honestly, there's a lot.
It's an important distinction.
That's where everyone is right now. No one's really shopping anyone. The only people that like the Nets are shopping Spencer Dinwiddie, right? Like they want to move Spencer Dinwiddie. And like, look, I think there are some changes that are going to shake up the market a little bit in terms of who's available and who's not. And that will probably shake some things loose as you go to plan Bs, et cetera. But that's like a lot of what you're looking at. For example, there's been a few reports of Alex Caruso with like 2 first rounders being the asking price for the Chicago Bulls. Like I've heard it more. Like I've heard they are resistant to the idea of moving Caruso. Now I don't know if that means, I honestly think the DDR might get moved. DeMar DeRozan might get moved just because he's an expiring contract. And if DeMar's like, hey, like I'm getting up there, I'd like to go play somewhere and win. That if you're Chicago and you're like, look, man, we don't know how we're going to get there, then that might be a thing where it makes sense to move him. But I think it'll be kind of tough to figure out a lot of these dynamics. Most of these teams are not looking to just trade guys to trade guys. They were trying to trade them for what are viewed as upgrades, but everybody can't get an upgrade in these deals.
That's the one that doesn't make sense. Like I get it from the Houston perspective. Again, you've got a goal. You're a lot closer to achieving that goal than Chicago is. So you're not going to shop or include his name. You would be willing to include Jalen's name in an upgrade. But for Chicago, it's like that seems more like you're just kind of meandering about and not really quite sure. Like Alex Caruso is a fine player, but is he a part of your long-term growth and then achieving that next stage, whatever that might be for that group? Probably not. I can't imagine why you'd want to hang on to players like DeRozan or Vucevic or Caruso, knowing you can get something now and go into a full rebuild and take a step back so that you can take more steps forward than what you're capable of with this current roster. Because if not, you're not even achieving anything. Like Miami has been accused of in the past of not pulling the trigger and things of that sort. But they've had the success in the postseason that Chicago hasn't had since the 90s. So it's a very, very different barometer for what you're supposed to do at the trade market. I don't know. That's just the way I see it. If you're looking at the Bulls roster right now and you're not going to win a lot and you're not going to accomplish anything, why not be willing to trade Caruso? Maybe not for 2 first-round picks, but maybe for a usable young player and a first-round pick.
I just love the Heat exceptionalism dripping off of the screen right now. Exceptionalism. That'll do it for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, Tuesday. Jake Mass and John Corrales will recap all the action in the association. And make sure to check out the Locked On Fantasy Basketball show on Thursday for the NBA trade deadline as well here on Locked On NBA at youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. You can catch David Ramil on Twitter at DRamil13. I'm on HP Basketball. Leave us those 5-star reviews, please. We'll see you guys again next time. Thanks for joining us on Locked On NBA.